Imagine this for a moment. In the blink of an eye, people just vanish. Gone. Leaving behind, just their clothes, their cars, everything. And this profound silence. It's a concept, really, that's fueled so many stories, endless debates, and some really deeply held beliefs for generations. So today we're doing a deep dive into the biblical idea behind this pretty astonishing phenomenon commonly known as the rapture. Now, this idea, you see it pop up in popular culture, theological discussions. It carries a lot of weight, and honestly, there's a lot of potential for confusion, maybe misinterpretation. But our goal today, it isn't really to take sides or, debate specific viewpoints. We're here to clarify, to bring a, let's say, grounded understanding to a concept that has really captivated believers and skeptics alike. We want to try and clear away some of that fog and give you, our listener, a really well-informed perspective, drawing straight from some key foundational sources.
Exactly. And to guide us on this, well, it is an intricate journey. We're primarily drawing from Brother Fred Clements, Getting Caught Up in the Rapture, a study guide.
Yeah.
It's really a remarkably insightful and, I think, clarifying piece of work. It cuts through a lot of the common confusion you hear. We'll also be pulling insights from some supporting biblical expositions like Rapture.pdf and the Rapture and Christ's Return, a biblical exposition.
Right.
These sources, they're kind of like our compass for this discussion. They help us distill the key insights, the biblical references, to give you a clear, comprehensive, and hopefully a cohesive picture of this really significant topic.
Yeah, that's really our mission today, to unpack this profound idea, to really understand its biblical roots, the terminology behind it, and its ultimate significance. So you can walk away not just, informed, but truly understanding why this concept resonates so deeply with so many people who believe. It's really about getting a shortcut, in a way, to being well-versed on a subject that touches on humanity's deepest questions about the future, about divine purpose.
And what's truly insightful, and Brother Fred Clements illustrates this powerfully, is how this deep human curiosity we all have about future events, about, well, divine plans, the deeper meanings in sacred texts, it's universal. He emphasizes that the enemy, often identified as Satan, frequently tries to obscure these vital truths, to create confusion, disputes around prophecies like the rapture. In a way, the very debates and its interpretations, they almost inadvertently underscore the profound significance of these truths. They act like a testament to the core truth's enduring power and its direct challenge to, well, Satan's ultimate demise, which Revelation 20.cs talks about. So this makes clarity not just like a convenience, but really a spiritual imperative for understanding humanity's ultimate hope and God's meticulously orchestrated plan for redemption. And that, incidentally, brings us right into the realm of eschatology, that vital branch of theology dealing with the ultimate destiny of humanity and the cosmos, covering events like the rapture, the tribulation, Christ's return, all of it.
Okay, right. Let's unpack this then.
Mm-hmm.
The term rapture itself, that often sparks immediate questions, doesn't it? I mean, many people point out, and it's a fair point, that the word rapture doesn't actually appear, like literally, in the Bible. So how do we justify using it, especially if it's considered a core belief for some? It seems like a pretty significant linguistic hurdle,
That's a really common point and a valid one. And Brother Fred Clements, he tackles it head on with I think, a really helpful analogy. Think about the word Bible itself.
Okay.
We all use it, right?
Yeah.
But the word Bible isn't explicitly in Scripture either. It comes from the Greek word biblos, which just means book.
Ah, okay. I see where you're going.
Yeah. So in the same way, rapture functions as a descriptive term for a biblical event that is clearly described, rather than being a direct biblical word itself. Clements puts it simply as a way of describing the catching up of God's people. Gammas puts it simply as a way of describing the catching up of God's people. He even wisely suggests, if you get into a debate about the term, you can say caught up or the catching up of the church. It gets you past the semantics right to the core concept.
Right. Focus on the event, not just the label.
Precisely.
That Bible analogy, that actually helps quite a bit. But okay, it's descriptive. Where does the word rapture come from? What's its linguistic history if it's not directly from Scripture? This is where it gets really interesting for me.
It has some deep roots, actually, going back through the history of our English Bibles.
Yeah.
The English word rapture, it ultimately comes from the Latin word rapio.
Rapio.
Okay. Yeah, rapio. And it's a powerful word. It means to seize or snatch. And it can relate to, an ecstasy of spirit, but also, very importantly for us, the actual physical removal from one place to another.
Just physical removal. Okay.
But the core biblical equivalent, the word used in the original Greek New Testament that our sources highlight, is harpazo.
Harpazo.
Harpazo. And this word, it's anything but passive. It carries this really active, forceful set of meanings. To seize, to carry off by force, to seize on, claim for oneself eagerly, or to snatch out or away. It really emphasizes a sudden, forceful, often unexpected action, like grabbing something quickly.
Wow, okay. That's much more active than just caught up might sound initially.
It really is. And what's significant is that this Greek root, harpazo, it shows up 13 times in the New Testament.
13 times.
Yeah. So it illustrates that while the English term rapture is a later word we use to describe it, the underlying concept, the specific divine action, is thoroughly embedded right there in the original scriptural texts.
So this isn't just about getting bogged down in words and semantics. It's
Yeah.
about understanding the actual action being described in the Bible. What does knowing this, knowing the etymology, mean for us, for you listening, as we try to understand this topic?
Knowing the etymology, it's actually incredibly helpful for your journey here. It validates the whole conceptual basis of the rapture. It lets us move past those, let's say, superficial objections about the word itself not being in the Bible.
Right, right.
And instead, we can engage more deeply with the powerful scriptural events it describes. It lays a groundwork for critical thinking. So you're not kind of overwhelmed by these initial linguistic hurdles.
Yeah.
You can focus instead on the powerful biblical narrative, which reveals God's consistent character. It shows the concept isn't some later invention, but it's a description of a divine act that's consistently present in the original texts. And what's striking when you look at all these uses of harpazo is that it's not just about one future event. It reveals a consistent divine operating principle, you could say.
An operating principle. How so?
God's sovereign right, his demonstrated power to suddenly and decisively intervene, often by snatching away his people or his will from some unfolding scenario. This pattern, it transforms the rapture from just an isolated prophecy into, well, an integrated thread of God's active, protective, and sometimes forceful involvement throughout history.
That really grounds the concept, doesn't it? It's not just a word, it's a consistent divine action woven through Scripture. So now that we know the root, harpazo, let's see it in action. Where else does the snatching away show up in the New Testament? How does it reveal its versatility in different contexts?
Absolutely. Because while the ultimate rapture refers to that specific future event for the church, looking at these other instances where harpazo is used, it helps build a much richer understanding of the act itself, the act of being caught up or removed. It really illustrates God's power to intervene suddenly and decisively in all sorts of situations, whether it's for protection, revelation, or even judgment in some cases.
Okay.
You start to see this isn't some novel idea, but a powerful divine action with actually many historical precedents that shape how we think about God's intervention. Okay, let's look at Matthew 11:12. Jesus is talking, and he says, "The kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent take it by force."
Take it by force.
Right, take it by force is harpazo. It depicts this aggressive, active taking, a powerful, determined seizure, a forceful entry into the kingdom.
Okay, so a very active meaning there.
Very active. Then, shift to Matthew 13:19. This is in the parable of the sower. Jesus explains that when someone hears the word of the kingdom but doesn't understand it, then cometh the wicked one and catcheth away. There it is, harpazo, that which was sown in his heart.
So a spiritual snatching this time.
Exactly. It illustrates this swift, almost insidious removal of truth, highlighting how quickly the enemy can work to steal understanding.
That really brings out that sense of urgency, even spiritual warfare implied by the term.
It does. And then for a completely different feel, look at John 10:28-29. This offers such powerful assurance, such security. Jesus says, "I give unto them eternal life, and they shall never perish, neither shall any man pluck them out, harpazo, of my hand. My Father, which gave them me, is greater than all, and no man is able to pluck them out, harpazo, of my Father's hand."
Wow, so there it means you can't be snatched away.
Precisely. It signifies this protective, unbreakable grip, an assurance that no external force can forcibly remove believers from Christ's or the Father's care. It's the same action word, but used here to show its impossibility against God's power.
It's powerful. Okay, what about more literal examples, like actual physical removal?
Well, one of the most vivid, most literal instances of harpazo outside of 1 Thessalonians has to be in Acts chapter 8, verse 39. Picture this. Philip has just baptized the Ethiopian eunuch, a really profound spiritual moment out on a desert road. And as they come up out of the water, the Spirit of the Lord caught away harpazo Philip, that the eunuch saw him no more.
Just gone.
Just gone, vanished. It's a divine disappearance, a literal, physical whisking away that just defies any natural explanation. It must have left the eunuch completely certain about the supernatural power involved.
Well, I'll bet.
Philip was just instantaneously transported to another town, Azotus, to keep preaching. Imagine the eunuch trying to explain that when he got home. Yeah, the baptism was great, but the preacher kind of teleported.
Huh. Yeah, that's a compelling example. An instantaneous physical transportation. It makes the whole concept of a catching away feel tangibly real.
And then there's the Apostle Paul's own extraordinary experience. He talks about in 2 Corinthians 12, verses 2 and 4. He speaks of a man, and it's widely understood he means himself being caught up, harpazo, to the third heaven, and then caught up, harpazo again, into paradise, where he heard unspeakable words.
To the third heaven, into paradise.
Yeah. It emphasizes this extraordinary supernatural transport to a divine realm, somewhere beyond human comprehension, for a specific revelatory experience. Finally, look at Revelation 12, verse 5. It talks about a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and this child was caught up, arpazo, unto God and to his throne.
The man-child, often interpreted as Christ.
Primarily, yes. It refers mainly to Christ's ascension and his enthronement after the resurrection. But significantly, it uses the identical caught-up language, harpazo, connecting his ascension into this same divine pattern of being taken up into God's presence.
These are truly fascinating examples. Harpazo is clearly a versatile word describing a powerful divine action. But when we think about the rapture, the future event for believers, what's the single most crucial scripture? The one that really anchors this concept for us, bringing it all together.
Right. That would have to be the cornerstone verse, 1 Thessalonians 4:17. It's the verse most directly associated with the future event we call the rapture.
Okay, read it for us.
It says, "Then we, which are alive and remain, shall be caught up together with them in the clouds, to meet the Lord in the air. And so shall we ever be with the Lord."
So much packed in there.
Absolutely. Let's break it down. It speaks of those alive and remain, clearly talking about living believers at that specific future moment. They will be caught up together, emphasizing it's a collective, simultaneous event involving all true believers, both those alive and those who have died and are resurrected.
Caught up together. Okay.
Then, in the clouds, to meet the Lord in the air. This indicates a heavenly rendezvous, an ascent above the earth, not a return to it at that moment.
In the air, specifically.
Yes, and the outcome is profoundly significant. And so shall we ever be with the Lord. This signifies a permanent, eternal union with Christ, starting from that moment. So you see how this verse clearly highlights the distinct future, collective, and intensely supernatural nature of this event. It sets it apart from those individual instances of harpazo we discussed earlier, and really establishes the biblical basis for the church's catching away.
It really does show that this concept of being divinely removed or taken isn't some fringe idea or, a new invention. It seems deeply woven into the very fabric of the biblical narrative, into God's consistent interaction with humanity throughout history. It makes you realize the foundation for the rapture, even if the term is debated, is built on a very ancient and consistent divine pattern.
Exactly. A pattern of intervention and removal.
Now, speaking of patterns, if we look through Scripture, Brother Fred Clemens points to what he calls 7 literal rapture-specific moments where individuals or groups were supernaturally taken from Earth. It makes you wonder, is there a deliberate pattern here? Is God showing us something through these historical accounts, maybe setting a precedent for a future, larger event?
It's a truly compelling argument for just that, a divine pattern, a consistent thread in God's interaction. These 7 instances, they're presented as direct physical removals by God's power. Each one is unique, but they all share that core essence of being caught up.
Okay, let's walk through them. Who's first?
First, we have Enoch. He's mentioned in Genesis 5, Jude 1, and Hebrews 11. Imagine this, a man who walked with God so intimately for 300 years that the text simply says one day, he was not, for God took him.
Just took him. Not that he died.
Exactly. It wasn't death in the usual sense. It's described as a literal translation, a physical removal from earthly life directly into God's presence without experiencing mortality. It's a profound demonstration of God's power to supernaturally bypass death for his chosen ones. It sets a clear precedent for a future collective catching away.
Wow. Okay, who's next in this pattern?
Then there's Elijah, a really powerful prophet. His departure is incredibly dramatic, chronicled in 2 Kings chapter 2. We read that Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven, carried by a chariot of fire drawn by horses of fire.
A chariot of fire, that's spectacular.
Absolutely. A stunning scene of divine transport. A sudden supernatural physical removal from earth to the heavenly realm. And significantly, Elisha, his protege, witnessed it firsthand, confirming the literal nature of this event.
Okay, Enoch and Elijah, who else fixed this literal rapture pattern?
The Apostle Paul, as we touched on earlier, he recounts his own extraordinary experience in 2 Corinthians 12, being caught up to the third heaven and into paradise.
Right, the revelatory transport.
Yes. And our sources also mention his near-death experience in Acts 14, where he was stoned at Lystra, left for dead, but then miraculously rose up. Now, that stoning isn't a rapture in the same way, but it speaks to divine intervention and preservation, a different form of being taken from a deadly situation, showing God's hand protecting him.
So it's not always a pleasant ride, but still a divine act of removal or protection in some sense?
Exactly. It highlights God's power over life and death circumstances. Then we have Philip, back in Acts 8.39.
The disappearing act after the baptism.
Right. That instant physical disappearance. The Spirit of the Lord caught away Philip, that the eunuch saw him no more. An undeniable, instantaneous physical teleportation by divine power. And it's worth clarifying here. Our source material mentions Acts 1.9 possibly in relation to Philip, but careful study shows Acts 1.9 is actually describing Jesus' ascension. Philip's miraculous catching away is definitely Acts 8.39.
Good clarification. It highlights the need for careful reading.
It does, which Brother Clemens himself always advocates.
Mm.
Okay, moving more into the prophetic realm now. We have John in Revelation chapter 4, verse 1. He hears that voice like a trumpet saying, "Come up hither."
Come up hither.
Yes. And this is often understood as a powerful prophetic picture or type of the church's rapture, like a preview of a collective ascent, with John representing the church being called from earth to heaven before the tribulation events start unfolding in the following chapters.
A symbolic rapture, almost.
A prophetic picture, yes. Then there are the two witnesses in Revelation chapter 11. After they're killed in Jerusalem, their bodies lie in the street for 3.5 days.
Wow.
But then the breath of life from God enters them. They stand up.
And then?
And they ascended up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies beheld them.
Wow. A public rapture witnessed by their enemies.
Exactly. A dual, literal rapture, right before the eyes of a stunned world. Again, demonstrating this divine removal from earthly judgment.
Okay, that's 6. Who's the 7th in this pattern?
Finally, the Son, Jesus himself, described in Revelation 12.5 as the man-child, caught up from so unto God into his throne. Now, as we said, this primarily refers to Christ's ascension and enthronement after his resurrection. But the key thing is, it uses the identical caught-up language, harpazo, firmly connecting even Christ's own ascension into this divine pattern of being taken up into God's presence, signifying ultimate triumph and divine authority.
That's quite a list. 7 instances of individuals or small groups being caught up or removed. But beyond these direct examples, our sources also highlight something else. Pictures of rescue from the Old Testament. These aren't necessarily raptures in the same prophetic sense, but they seem like incredibly powerful stories that foreshadow this idea of divine intervention and removal. They demonstrate God's consistent character, right? Protecting and preserving his people.
That's exactly right. These Old Testament narratives, while historical, they illustrate this common and profound theme. God actively preserving his people from impending judgment rather than just seeing them through it. They reveal his selective rescue.
Like who? Give us some examples.
Okay, think about Lot's family in Genesis 19. They were literally taken, almost dragged by the hand by angels out of Sodom and Gomorrah before the fire and brimstone rained down.
Right, the angels hurried them.
Exactly. The text emphasizes the angels hurried them out, showing God's urgency to remove his righteous ones from the coming wrath.
Okay, that's a clear removal before judgment.
Definitely. Similarly, Noah's family in Genesis 7. They were preserved in the ark before the global flood began. They were selectively rescued from that widespread destruction, not left to tread water outside the ark. God provided a means of escape, the ark, and then he literally shut them in, protecting them from the judgment that was falling on the rest of the world.
So it's a theme of being spared from the judgment itself, not just protected within it. Even if you're in an ark, you're separated from it.
Precisely. That separation is key. Then you have Rahab's family in Joshua chapter 6. They were saved from the destruction of Jericho while it was falling. As the walls crumbled under God's judgment, they were safely harbored inside Rahab's house, marked by the scarlet cord, because of her faith and the covenant she made with the Israelite spies, divinely set apart for rescue amidst the chaos.
Another clear case of preservation from the surrounding destruction.
Yes. And think about Joash, the baby king. In 2 Chronicles 22, he was hidden away, miraculously preserved from Athaliah's murderous purge of the entire royal line. He was divinely shielded from a decree that would have wiped out the lineage of David. demonstrating God's meticulous protection of his covenant promises, preserving the line from extinction. Then there's the Shunammite woman in 2 Kings 8. She was protected from a severe 7-year famine. Elisha warned her. She was divinely guided away before the famine struck, preserving her from that widespread hardship.
These are powerful examples of being removed or protected before the disaster hits.
And maybe most strikingly, look at Isaiah chapter 26, verses 19 through 21. The prophet says, "Thy dead men shall live. Awake and sing, ye that dwell in dust." Then he adds this, "Come, my people, enter thou into thy chambers, and shut thy doors about thee. Hide thyself, as it were, for a little moment, until the indignation be overpast."
Wow, hide thyself until the indignation be overpassed. That sounds incredibly relevant.
Doesn't it? It strongly echoes this idea of God's people being sheltered, hidden away from a specific period of divine wrath, entering a place of safety until God's indignation, his judgment, has concluded. It's a powerful Old Testament parallel to the idea of the church's rapture before the tribulation.
Okay, so if we connect all these dots, the literal raptures, these Old Testament pictures of rescue, what's the bigger picture? What does this pattern tell us?
What we see repeatedly, consistently, is God actively intervening. Sometimes removing individuals directly to himself, like Enoch or Elijah. Other times preserving a select group from a coming judgment, like Noah or Lot. It establishes this divine precedent, this consistent pattern of action throughout biblical history. It shows God's meticulous care for his covenant people.
Yeah, it really underscores God's detailed plan, not just for redemption through sacrifice, but for active protection as well. A promise hinted at right back in the Garden of Eden, demonstrated at Calvary, and seemingly extending into the future.
Yes, it paints a picture of a God who actively ensures the safety and preservation of his own people when facing judgment, often by removing them from the very hour of trial itself.
That's a powerful and consistent theme running right through Scripture. Okay, let's shift gears slightly and turn to the book of Revelation. It's often seen as, well, mysterious, maybe even confusing. But our sources highlight a pivotal moment right near the beginning in chapter 4, verse 1. Many see this as a prophetic blueprint for the rapture itself. It's where John gets this glimpse into what's coming, and the imagery is just profound.
It absolutely is. Revelation 4.1 marks a critical turning point in the book, especially for understanding the sequence of future events and the church's place in God's prophetic timeline. John writes, "After this I looked, and behold, a door was opened in heaven. And the first voice which I heard was as it were of a trumpet talking with me, which said, Come up hither, and I will show thee things which must be hereafter."
Okay, let's break that down carefully. A door was opened in heaven. What does that signify?
That open door in heaven is highly symbolic. It signifies divine access, an immediate invitation to witness heavenly events. It actually echoes a promise Jesus made just before this, in Revelation 3.8, to the faithful church of Philadelphia. "I have set before thee an open door, and no man can shut it."
So it's an invitation to enter God's presence, essentially.
Exactly, an invitation into the very throne room of God. Then notice the sound. "The first voice which I heard was, as it were, of a trumpet talking with me."
A voice like a trumpet. Why a trumpet?
That's significant. The Greek word here is salpinx. In the ancient world, trumpets were used for crucial announcements, military calls, assembling the people, declaring war. Biblically, trumpets often herald momentous divine action.
Like at Mount Sinai.
Exactly, like at Sinai or for gathering Israel, and very often in end times, eschatological context. Think Matthew 24, 1 Corinthians 15, 1 Thessalonians 4 itself.
Right, the trumpet call.
So when John hears a voice like a trumpet, it's not just loud, it's an unmistakable sovereign signal. It conveys urgency, authority, the start of God's final, decisive actions. There's no ambiguity. It signals a major shift.
An unmistakable divine message. And what is that message?
It's a direct command. Come up hither.
Come up here.
Yes, this direct command for John to ascend is interpreted by many commentators, including those in our sources, as a powerful symbolic call for the church itself to be raptured. John, in this moment, represents believers being called up from earth to heaven. And look what John immediately witnesses after this call, from verse 2 onwards through the rest of chapter 4.
The throne room scene.
Yes. But it's not just beautiful imagery. It's a meticulously detailed vision of God's sovereign court. He sees the throne, the one seated on it like jasper and sardine stone, suggesting glory and righteous judgment. The emerald rainbow around the throne speaks powerfully of God's covenant faithfulness and mercy, always present even in judgment. He sees the 24 elders in white robes with golden crowns, often interpreted as representing the entire redeemed church, already glorified and enthroned. He sees lightnings, thunderings, voices emanating from the throne, the 7 lamps representing the 7 spirits of God, the sea of glass like crystal, the 4 living creatures in constant worship.
It's an overwhelming picture of
It
majesty.
is, and it's crucial because it sets the stage. This is where the caught-up ones are taken into the very heart of divine authority and worship in heaven, significantly, before the seals are opened and the intense judgments described in chapter 6 onwards begin to fall on the earth.
That positioning seems really important. And Revelation itself, you mentioned, gives us a kind of roadmap for understanding its prophecies, breaking things down into past, present, and future.
That's a vital point for critically engaging with Revelation. And Brother Fred Clements highlights this structure. Given in Revelation 1:19, Jesus explicitly tells John, "Write the things which thou hast seen, and the things which are, and the things which shall be hereafter."
Okay, so 3 categories.
3 categories. The things which thou hast seen refers to John's past experience, the vision of the glorified Jesus he just received in chapter 1. The things which are speaks to the present reality. The messages to the 7 churches in Asia Minor in chapters 2 and 3, representing the conditions and challenges of the entire church age, the now. And then, crucially, the things which shall be hereafter. This refers explicitly to future events. The Greek phrase is metatauta, literally meaning after these things.
After which things?
After the things concerning the churches, after the things which are, and the fact that John's call, "Come up hither," in Revelation 4:1, occurs immediately before the detailed prophecies of these things which shall be hereafter begin in chapter 6. Well, that's highly significant.
How so?
It strongly implies that the church, represented by John being called up, is removed from the earthly scene before these intense future tribulation events start. It distinguishes the church's position in heaven during that future period, described as metatauta.
That structural shift is really telling, placing the come up hither right at that transition point. But why? Why would believers be called up before these things hereafter? Our sources point to a key promise in Revelation chapter 3, verse 10, that gives a powerful reason for this divine preservation.
This is truly a cornerstone verse for understanding the purpose behind the rapture, often cited as a direct promise from Christ to the faithful church. It's in the message to the church at Philadelphia. Revelation 3:10 states, "Because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I also will keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon all the world to try them that dwell upon the earth."
Okay, I also will keep thee from the hour of temptation.
Yes, the key promise is keep thee from.
Yeah.
Now, what is this hour of temptation or hour of trial? The verse defines it clearly. It's a future period of unprecedented global upheaval and divine judgment, what we commonly call the tribulation, that shall come upon all the world to try them that dwell upon the earth. It's a worldwide testing.
Okay. And the promise is to be kept from it.
Exactly. And the interpretation of keep thee from is critical here. The specific Greek phrase used is tyrio, kyrio.
Kyrio ik.
Yes, it literally means to keep out of or to preserve from. Linguistically, it suggests a complete removal and exemption from entering into the experience itself. This is distinct from another Greek phrase, tyrio, which would mean to keep through or to preserve within the trial.
That's a subtle but crucial difference.
It's incredibly important. This specific wording, terioik, strongly supports the interpretation that the faithful church will be divinely spared from entering that specific global period of judgment, kept out of it altogether, aligning perfectly with a pre-tribulation rapture view. It's a promise of complete removal from that intense hour of trial that tests the whole world.
That linguistic nuance really deepens the meaning of that promise. It suggests a sovereign act of removal, not just protection within the chaos. It paints this picture, then, of a loving God actively protecting his own, which fits perfectly with the ultimate triumph over the enemy, Satan's eventual demise in the lake of fire, described in Revelation 20:10. So this comprehensive understanding of the rapture and Christ's return, it prompts a vital question for you listening. What does this mean for your perspective on hope, on readiness, on the unfolding of divine purpose? Especially knowing it culminates in God wiping away all tears, as Revelation 21:4 promises.
It really reinforces the profound consistency of God's redemptive plan throughout all of history. If God has such a meticulously detailed plan, not just for salvation, but also to spare his faithful ones from this specific global trial, it highlights his unwavering covenantal care. It points to this consistent divine commitment from the Garden of Eden to Calvary and right through these future events. His ultimate purpose is always moving towards bringing about that state of perfect peace and joy where all tears are indeed wiped away. Thinking about this grand narrative really encourages us to consider our own readiness, our own hope in light of such a sovereign and, well, loving God.
Absolutely. Now, moving beyond the literal events and the prophetic visions, there's another way the rapture is often explained, one that's maybe more beautiful and relatable for many. That's the imagery of an ancient Jewish wedding. Our sources highlight this as a wonderful analogy, rich with cultural meaning, deeply personal, helping us grasp the intimacy and even the timing of these profound events. It illustrates that deep covenant between Christ and the church.
It truly is a beautiful and powerful analogy. The ancient Jewish wedding custom provides an incredibly rich cultural framework for understanding the relationship between Christ and his church, which the Bible, of course, often refers to as the bride of Christ. And this analogy, it isn't just, poetic fluff. It actually maps out the sequence of events surrounding the rapture and Christ's return in a way that resonates deeply with biblical themes of covenant, anticipation, and ultimate union. It really humanizes the prophecy, making it a story of love and commitment.
Okay, let's walk through these stages then. Let's look at the Jewish wedding analogy and see how each step illuminates prophetic truth about Christ and the church. Where does it begin?
Absolutely. It begins with the ketubah, or the betrothal. We see echoes of this reflected even in Matthew 1:18, with Joseph and Mary being espoused. In ancient Jewish culture, this betrothal was a binding covenant. It was a legal engagement, far more serious and legally enforceable than, say, our modern idea of engagement. It usually involved the groom paying a significant bride price.
A bride price. Okay.
Spiritually, this perfectly represents the initial covenant and promise established between Christ and the church at the moment of salvation. When we accept him as Lord and Savior, that's the betrothal. It's a sealed, unbreakable agreement, purchased at the greatest price imaginable, the precious blood of Christ himself.
So once that betrothal is sealed, the bride doesn't immediately move in with the groom, right? There's a waiting period.
Exactly. That's a key part of the analogy. After the betrothal, there's this vital period where the bride is set apart and prepares herself for her groom. We see concepts like this beautifully illustrated in places like Psalm 45 or even the story of Esther preparing to meet the king. The bride would undergo a period of, purification, personal preparation, making herself ready for the wedding day.
Making yourself ready.
Yes. And this symbolizes the church's ongoing journey of sanctification and purification. Our commitment as believers to making ourselves ready spiritually, morally, for Christ's return. It's an active process of living in holiness, in expectation, striving to be, as Ephesians 5 puts it, a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing.
And then after the betrothal, the groom actually leaves for a time. That's the significant part of the tradition too, isn't it?
It is, and this is where the analogy lines up so powerfully with what Jesus himself said. Following the betrothal, there's the departure of the groom. This stage perfectly parallels John 14, verses 2 and 3, where Jesus told his disciples right before his ascension, "I go to prepare a place for you. I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also."
I go to prepare a place for you.
Precisely. The Jewish groom would leave his betrothed bride and go back to his father's house, often for a significant period, maybe a year or even more. And his task was to build or prepare the bridal chamber, the new home for them. This directly mirrors what Christ has done for his church. He ascended to heaven after his resurrection, his departure, to prepare our eternal home in his Father's house.
So while the groom is away preparing the place, the bride isn't just sitting around idly, is she? The parable of the 10 virgins seems relevant here.
Absolutely. That parable is key. While the groom is away, the bride gets ready. Matthew 25, the parable of the 10 virgins, vividly depicts this. It highlights the church's need for an ongoing state of readiness and watchfulness. The bride, like the wise virgins, must keep her lamp trimmed and her supply of oil replenished. It emphasizes the need for continuous spiritual preparation, vigilance, a ready heart, because she doesn't know the exact hour of the groom's return.
You have to be ready when he shows up.
Exactly. It's a call to active spiritual attentiveness, not just passive waiting, which leads directly to the next stage, the surprise gathering. In the Jewish tradition, the groom would return for his bride at an unexpected time, often in the middle of the night. His arrival would be announced by a shout, perhaps from his best man, and often the blast of a shofar, a trumpet.
A shout and a trumpet, just like 1 Thessalonians 4 describes for the rapture.
Exactly. It illustrates perfectly the imminent and sudden nature of the rapture. It will occur, as 1 Corinthians 15:52 says, in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. A sudden, glorious, unexpected arrival of the groom for his bride, heralded by the voice of the archangel and the trumpet of God. just as the wedding analogy suggests.
That connection is amazing. Okay, so after the surprise gathering, the groom finally takes his bride. What's next in the celebration according to the tradition?
Then comes the huppah, or the consummation. The wedding canopy itself is called the huppah. It represents the intimate physical union of the bride and groom. Genesis 29:22 mentions a wedding feast, which implies this consummation. Spiritually, this symbolizes the ultimate union of Christ and the church in heaven after the rapture. It's often referred to as the marriage supper of the Lamb, described beautifully in Revelation 19:7-9. It represents the grand celebratory culmination of our eternal bond with Him, a time of unparalleled joy, intimacy, and celebration in the Father's house.
The marriage supper of the Lamb.
Yes. And following that, there's typically the one-week celebration. We see hints of this kind of extended feast in places like Esther 1.2 and other Old Testament wedding accounts. This week-long wedding feast, traditionally 7 days, is often linked prophetically to the 7-year tribulation period that will be unfolding down on earth.
So while the wedding feast is happening in heaven,
Exactly. While the earth experiences that intense period of judgment and upheaval known as the tribulation, the church, the bride, is safely in heaven, celebrating with Christ at the marriage supper, experiencing the joy and intimacy of her eternal union, completely spared from the wrath being poured out below.
that really brings the whole picture together. Now, this raises an important question. How does this analogy do more than just make the rapture concept beautiful or understandable? How does it really highlight that deeply personal covenantal relationship between Christ and his church?
Well, it truly elevates the concept, doesn't it? It moves it from just being abstract prophecy to being really a cosmic love story, a divine romance. It underscores the incredible intimacy, the commitment, the faithfulness involved in God's plan. It reveals his character not just as king or judge, but as a faithful groom who has paid the price, gone to prepare a place, and will return for his prepared bride. It transforms what could feel like a scary or abstract prophecy into something filled with anticipation, hope, and deep joy. It reminds us of God's omniscient plan for redemption, a plan that is both grand in its cosmic scope, yet intensely personal in its focus on the relationship between Christ and his church. It's a powerful affirmation of divine commitment and a future reunion that is both deeply personal and globally significant. It really is a beautiful picture. Okay, let's shift to a crucial point of clarification now. Many people, perhaps unintentionally, use the terms rapture and second coming almost interchangeably. But our sources, especially Brother Clement's work, make it incredibly clear. These are two distinct events. They have very different characteristics, different timings, different purposes, different implications. Getting this distinction right is absolutely crucial for anyone trying to understand end times prophecy or eschatology in general.
You're absolutely right. This is probably one of the most common areas of confusion when people discuss prophecy, and clarifying it is essential if you want a coherent and accurate understanding. If we connect this back to the bigger picture, seeing these as two separate events helps us accurately interpret the timelines God has laid out. It helps us identify who is involved in each event and grasp the ultimate purposes behind God's intricate plan. Let's meticulously lay out these distinctions side by side because the details really do matter here. Okay, let's do it. It's a fascinating comparison, and it really highlights the meticulous detail in God's prophetic word. First up, let's talk about direction. Where are people going, or where is Christ going in each event?
Okay. For the rapture, as we saw clearly in 1 Thessalonians 4:17, believers go up, we are caught up to meet the Lord in the air. It's an ascent, a rendezvous above the earth. The church is snatched away from the world. In stark contrast, for the return of Christ, often called the second coming, as described in Zechariah 14.4 and Revelation 19:11-14, Christ comes down to earth. He descends from heaven, leading his heavenly armies. His feet will literally touch the Mount of Olives. So completely opposite directions.
Up versus down. Okay, that's clear. What about the destination? Where do believers end up immediately after the rapture versus where Christ ends up at his return?
During the rapture, believers are taken to heaven, to the Father's house, to be with the Lord in his presence, as John saw symbolically in Revelation 4, and as Jesus promised in John 14:3, that where I am, there ye may be also. With the return of Christ, Christ himself, along with his saints, the church who were previously raptured and glorified, comes to earth. He arrives on earth to establish his millennial kingdom, fulfilling numerous Old Testament prophecies about his earthly reign. So heaven versus earth.
Got it. Heaven for the rapture, earth for the return. Now, timing is another critical difference, right? One seems like it could happen any second, while the other has specific prerequisites.
Indeed, the rapture is consistently described as imminent. This theological term means it could happen at any moment. There are no preceding signs or events that must occur first on earth before the rapture can happen. This understanding keeps believers in a state of constant readiness, alertness, expectation. It reflects that no man knows the day or hour aspect regarding its suddenness.
Imminent could be any time.
Right. The return of Christ, however, is not imminent in the same way. It has set signs that absolutely must precede it. A whole host of specific tribulation events, for example, detailed in Matthew 24 and Revelation chapters 6 through 18, clearly signal its approach. Its timing is tied to the fulfillment of those prior events.
Okay, so imminent versus set signs. What about their presence in Old Testament prophecy? Is one more clearly spelled out there than the other?
Oh, there's a huge difference here. The rapture is largely considered hidden or only vaguely implied in the Old Testament. We see those foreshadowings, those pictures of rescue, like Enoch or Lot that we discussed, but it's not explicitly detailed as a distinct collective event specifically for the church. It's primarily a New Testament revelation, often called a mystery revealed by Paul.
New Testament mystery.
Largely, yes. The return of Christ, on the other hand, is clearly prophesied throughout the Old Testament. Books like Zechariah, especially chapter 14, describing his feet landing on the Mount of Olives. Daniel, describing his everlasting kingdom smashing earthly kingdoms. Isaiah, Jeremiah. They all speak clearly about his literal, physical coming to reign on earth. Much more explicit.
Hidden versus clearly prophesied. Okay, now who actually sees these events? The audience or visibility? Is one more private, the other more public?
Starkly different again. The rapture is primarily for the church, for believers. It's often termed a secret snatching in the sense that the world doesn't witness the actual meeting in the air. Those left behind will certainly realize something dramatic has happened when millions disappear, but the event itself, believers meeting Christ in the clouds, won't be a global spectacle for all eyes.
So primarily for believers.
Yes. The return of Christ, however, is described as being visible to all people on earth. Revelation 1:7 says, "Behold, he cometh with clouds, and every eye shall see him, and they also which pierced him." It will be an unmistakable, undeniable, globally visible event, accompanied by cosmic signs in the heavens. No secrecy there at all.
Private versus public visibility. Interestingly, our sources even mention a potential difference in the time of day these events are often associated with.
That's right, though this might be more symbolic or based on implications. The rapture is often associated with night or unexpectedness, contributing to its sudden thief-in-the-night quality, as mentioned in 1 Thessalonians 5:2, regarding the day of the Lord which follows the rapture. It catches a sleeping world unawares. The return of Christ is pictured as occurring in day, a glorious, public, unmistakable event. Matthew 24:27 compares it to lightning flashing from east to west. Revelation 19 describes the brightness of his coming. It's a daytime, fully visible arrival, leaving no doubt about who he is.
Night versus day. Okay. What about Satan's status or role during or immediately following these two events? That seems like a major contrast.
It's a profound difference, marking a huge shift in the spiritual battle. At the time of the rapture and during the subsequent tribulation period, Satan is loose on earth. Revelation 12:1 speaks of him coming down with great wrath, knowing his time is short. He continues his deception and reign of terror during that period.
Satan is loose.
Yes. However, at the return of Christ, one of the first major actions is that Satan is bound. Revelation 20, verse 2, describes an angel binding him with a great chain and casting him into the bottomless pit for 1,000 years. This effectively removes his influence and power from the earth during Christ's millennial reign. A massive difference.
Loose versus bound. That's huge. Now, the very purpose of each event seems fundamentally different, too. Why does Christ come in each instance?
Yes, their core purposes are distinct. For the rapture, Christ comes for his bride. He descends into the air specifically to gather his church, the resurrected dead and living saints, to take them to be with him in heaven, fulfilling his promise from John 14:3. He comes for them. For the return of Christ, he comes with his bride. Revelation 19:14 clearly states that the armies which were in heaven followed him. This includes the glorified church returning with him. He comes with his saints to judge the wicked and establish his righteous kingdom on earth.
For the bride versus with the bride, that clarifies the church's role significantly. Okay, location. Where do these meetings or arrivals actually happen? Is it always on earth?
Not at all. For the rapture, as we keep emphasizing for 1 Thessalonians 4:17, Christ is met in the air. It's a mid-journey rendezvous above the earth. Critically, he does not touch the earth at the rapture. For the return of Christ, however, his feet literally touch earth. Zechariah 14:4 is incredibly specific, and his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east. This initiates his physical presence and rule directly on the planet.
Air versus earth. Got it. So it follows that their ultimate throne location or seat of power immediately following these events would be different too.
Exactly. The rapture takes believers to the throne room in heaven, to the Father's house, the seat of all divine authority, where the marriage supper of the Lamb takes place, Revelation 19. The focus shifts to heaven. The return of Christ establishes Christ's rule from Jerusalem on earth. Jerusalem becomes the capital of his earthly kingdom, fulfilling countless Old Testament prophecies about the Messiah reigning from Zion. The focus shifts to his reign on earth.
Heaven versus Jerusalem. Okay, two more distinctions. What about the associated duration of time that follows each event?
These are key prophetic time markers. The rapture immediately precedes and, in a sense, initiates the 7 years of the tribulation period on earth. While that's happening on earth, the church is understood to be in heaven for that 7-year duration, often linked to the marriage supper. The return of Christ immediately initiates the 1,000 years, the millennial reign of Christ on earth, a literal 1,000-year period of peace and righteousness under his direct rule. So 7 years versus 1,000 years.
7 years versus 1,000 years. Finally, what's the post-event status of the bride, the church, in relation to these time periods? How is the church involved after each event?
Okay, so after the rapture, the bride is in heaven during the 7-year tribulation. The source notes say the bride sees the 1,000 years, which implies that the church, being in heaven with Christ initially, will witness the events of the millennial kingdom unfolding on earth, perhaps from that glorified heavenly perspective, reigning spiritually with him. After the return of Christ, however, the church isn't just watching. The bride actively participates in the 1,000 years of the millennial reign. Revelation 20, verses 4 and 6, speak of the saints reigning with Christ during that 1,000 years. They return with him to rule and reign on earth. So it's a shift from being primarily in heaven to actively reigning with him on earth.
Witnessing versus reigning with him on earth, that's a significant clarification.
Yes. These 12 distinct differences, they aren't just, minor academic points. They have profound theological significance. They shape how we understand God's entire plan, the specific role he has for the church, the sequence of future events, everything. Understanding these distinctions encourages critical thinking, helps you read prophecy more accurately, rather than just accepting a single, often muddled narrative about Christ's coming. It really clarifies the coherence and the incredible detail of biblical prophecy in a truly impactful way.
It really is like having two separate, intricate puzzles that, when you finally solve them correctly and see how they relate, they fit together perfectly into one larger, magnificent picture of God's complete redemptive timeline. Understanding these distinctions truly unlocks a deeper appreciation for the coherence and detail of biblical prophecy, and maybe even helps us understand our place within it all. Wow. What a deep dive we have had today. We've journeyed through this rich and sometimes complex biblical concept of the rapture. We worked to clarify its terminology, understanding its roots in Latin rapio and Greek harpazo, revealing it describes a consistent divine action, not just a word. We explored those powerful instances of being caught up right there in Scripture, the literal historical examples like Enoch and Elijah, and the prophetic vision given to John in Revelation chapter 4. We marveled at that beautiful Jewish wedding analogy, how it illustrates Christ's intimate covenantal relationship with his church. And perhaps most importantly, we clearly distinguished the rapture from the second coming of Christ, setting both events in their proper prophetic context by comparing their direction, destination, timing, visibility, purpose, and so much more. It really unveiled the meticulous detail of God's prophetic plan.
It truly does bring into focus the incredible detail, the consistency of God's plan, doesn't it? Stretching all the way from the promises in the Garden of Eden, through the sacrifice at Calvary, and extending right through these future events, like the rapture, the tribulation, the glorious return of Christ. So given this comprehensive understanding, this tapestry of divine purpose and divine protection, here's a final thought for you to ponder. What does all this mean for your perspective? For your view on hope, on readiness, on the unfolding future, not just in some abstract global sense, but within the context of your own life, your own faith. How does understanding this meticulous plan reshape your view of God's unwavering commitment to his people? We really hope this deep dive has given you plenty to reflect on and maybe even inspired you to dig even deeper into these fascinating and ultimately hopeful prophecies. What stood out most to you from today's discussion? We definitely invite you to continue exploring these timeless truths